Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I'm your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 170, and we are going to take a look at the National Park Service Law Enforcement Rangers, also known as Park Rangers. So let's go ahead and dive into this puppy here. Just a little bit of background. They are commonly known as Law Enforcement Ranger or Protection Rangers. We call them Park Rangers. Kind of a little bit of a difference there. Their motto is very interesting. It is integrity, honor, and service. And this agency or this Law Enforcement Rangers was formed in 1916, so it goes back a long time. It is a federal agency, so these are federal workers with federal jobs, so they do get the cushy benefits as well, and more than likely they are in a labor union. I just don't know which one per se. But it is a federal agency, and the jurisdiction is in the United States, and they look after our national parks. And the nature of their job is federal law enforcement, civilian police. Their jurisdiction is the environment, parks, and or heritage property. Now, in terms of heritage property, what that is talking about, and possibly, it doesn't tell me this, but I'm assuming that they're talking about tribal lands. And we have talked about tribal lands in times past. And in regards to Native American tribes and casinos and things of that nature, you know, the tribal lands, they are a nation within a nation. So they were given permission to be a nation within the United States, which I do believe is a mistake because you can only serve one nation. You cannot serve two. And so needless to say, tribal lands tend to be very corrupt because the tribes are corrupt. You know, just because someone is Native American, that doesn't mean that they're a bunch of kind, sweet, generous, tree-hugging people. In fact, their tribes are typically very corrupt, and it starts at the top and trickles down. And so that's why a lot of these casinos are very corrupt. Another thing, you know, we have had this problem here in Oklahoma, and I have mentioned this in times past, where if you go to a casino, you have to be very careful about when you're walking to your car, just in general anyway, but especially at an Indian casino, because if you're going to an Indian casino and let's say you win a bunch of money, you're walking out to your vehicle and you get attacked, which typically does happen frequently, the tribal police are called. Not the local police, not the state police, not even federal police. It is the tribal police. And the odds of them defending you and protecting you are very low. So be aware of that because they are corrupt. It's very rare that they are good, wholesome people. It's just how it is. But that starts from the top down. You know, I've met a lot of Native Americans over the years that are very sweet, kind people, but their tribes are corrupt. So they operate in a very corrupt manner, and that's just how it is. So just FYI, be aware of that and practice caution whenever going to these tribal lands and or these casinos or these events that they have on their land. For example, they run, what's it called? You know, whenever they build like these huge casinos, they have a lot of entertainment venues. You need to be careful about that. You know, yes, they're awesome and, you know, maybe good to go to, but you need to be careful when you're walking to your car because if a crime is committed, again, because you are on tribal land, you know, that would be the responsibility of the tribal police to investigate and or arrest the person that assaulted you or, you know, murdered somebody, that kind of thing, because there is a lot of homicide on tribal lands. There's also a high rate of domestic violence as well as alcoholism, and that's just how it is with tribes, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is. So anyway, their jurisdiction is the environment, national parks, and or heritage property. Again, I'm assuming tribal lands. This particular entity is headquartered out of Washington, D.C. They have a little over 1,700 sworn members. And so their parent agency is the National Park Service, also known as NPS. And so what's interesting, whenever they're talking about their jurisdiction, just FYI, be aware that there are different types of jurisdiction. So the National Park Service Law Enforcement Rangers, you know, they are federal employees and they implement or they prosecute based on federal law. So it's not state and it's not local. So whenever a crime is committed or there's some kind of violation against the law, sometimes there are turf battles in terms of, okay, who is in charge of this investigation because what exactly occurred and what crime was committed because, not all crimes are the same, right? So just because something may be a federal crime, there are different federal agencies that have their own police force, which we have seen in times past. But there's a difference between, a crime that occurs because of a violation of a tax code, as opposed to something that occurs at a national park, as opposed to something that occurs at a state park, because national parks are not state parks. National parks, they are protected by, park rangers that are paid by the federal government because they are federal employees. State parks are managed by your state. So, for example, I am from Oklahoma, and we do have some very beautiful state parks here, but they are not managed or funded or protected by, park rangers from the federal government. It is at a state level. It's almost like how you have state troopers as opposed to local police officers. So that's why there's a difference in the jurisdiction here. So what's interesting about park rangers is that they have to do a lot that law enforcement does not do. And that's nothing against law enforcement. It's just a different type of job. It's a different career. So, with park rangers and, the law enforcement that goes into this, park rangers have to be trained as police officers, firefighters, lifeguards, and paramedics. Like, they have to be trained under all of that because they can experience any of that out in the field. Because, you think about people that get hurt at national parks. For example, let's say a child wanders off and falls into a ravine. Well, first of all, they have to have a search and rescue mission, basically. So they have to be able to find the child, and then they have to be able to give medical care to the child once they find the child, and then helicopter them out of there, right? So there's a lot of things that they have to be able to do that regular law enforcement does not do. Also, park rangers fight fires, so they also have to know how to do that. So it's almost like a park ranger is a police officer, a lifeguard, a firefighter, and a paramedic all in one. Now, what's interesting is that to be a park ranger, you did not have to have a college degree. But these days, there actually is a 4-year, possibly 5-year college degree that typically is required. I say typically because it's not 100%. You can actually get a degree in like social sciences or anthropology or archaeology, and you can use that degree to apply to be a park ranger or law enforcement ranger, as they say. But you still have to go through training. All of these enforcement rangers or protection rangers, they have to go through, I think it's like 83 days of training at a facility, I think in Georgia. Let's see here, if I remember this correctly. It's law enforcement rangers have to go through basic training for 83 days. The land management police training program. And so they all have to go through that. And it is very intensive. It's very serious. And so it kind of weeds out the weak. And I don't mean that negatively, but when it comes to, being in law enforcement and technically kind of being a park ranger with this, you have to be able to handle many things all at the same time that the average person is not used to. So that's why it does get serious really quick on the job with this. So some of their other duties that they do, besides, protecting the national parks and helping visitors and things like that, there are emergency medical services that they have to provide. They do firefighting, and they also do search and rescue. Now, under this umbrella, because this is a federal agency, they also have special agents. So there are special agents that they conduct criminal investigations in regards to crimes that occur at national parks or on those grounds. And so that's where it can also be a turf battle because, again, it depends on what exactly was the crime and what violations are there, because you don't want to have too many chiefs and not enough Indians, as they say. But that's why they have special agents. And so these are field agents that they travel a lot because they have a lot to, first of all, they have a lot to do. They have a lot to investigate. And also, if a case is severe enough or bad enough and that there is a violation that does need to go to court, that's when they write up an investigative report and they pass that along, or they give that to a United States attorney for prosecution. So there are crimes that are committed at our national parks. And an example of this, I've mentioned this in times past, there's a book I read about a field agent. She was working, she's a federal agent, but she's a field agent, and she was trying to help stop poaching at our national parks. And it was really serious what these guys were doing. They were basically killing off the wildlife in a couple different areas up in Alaska. And this woman back in the 70s, which this was unheard of for a woman to be, I guess, in law enforcement like that, and also to be working with the national parks and to be a special agent, and so things of that nature. But she helped bring down a ring of people that were poaching and just doing horrible things to our environment. So God bless her. She has since retired, but there's so many things that overlap with this. So we do have the National Park Service law enforcement rangers, and then you have people that actually work at the parks that are technically the park rangers. Maybe I should specify that. And then we have field agents, and you have special agents, and you have all this overlapping. So there are definitely different titles that go into this, but here's the thing. These different federal agencies, they basically all have their own law enforcement. So yes, you have, for example, with the national parks, you do have your park rangers, and that is a 4-year degree now, but you also have your law enforcement that goes into these national parks. My apologies for confusing that. But there's so many of these things that overlap, and the reason why it overlaps is because of jurisdiction and also the job responsibilities that they do. So I remember as a little girl, when we went to the Grand Canyon, we met some park rangers, and I had no doubt that they do a good job and do it well. But park rangers these days, they have to know a whole lot more, and a lot of them have to be trained to in firearms. They have to be trained in so many different things that was not done back in the day, because it's not just a environmental job. It's a safety job. It is a search and rescue position. So these things have changed pretty much over the years and from decade to decade. And I've noticed that change as well, even at our state parks. And that's one of those things, as your society grows and things change, when it comes to federal jobs and the public sector, if they are trying to protect the people and that's their job should grow and change over time, because things just naturally change in society. So that's always a good thing to see change. Change is not always bad. But in terms of training for these types of employees, there are two different types of training. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is permanent. They are a permanent law enforcement ranger. Then there's type 2, which is seasonal, a temporary law enforcement ranger. They still have to go through the 83 days of training under the Law Management Police Training Program. So it is a little bit different, and so it still is strenuous, and you want to make sure that you get the cream of the crop and it's someone that understands what they're doing. Me personally, I don't like seasonal positions because you're getting people that don't do it for a living, and they don't do it full time. An example of this, it's not related to national parks, but there is a story I read online, it was in the news a long time ago, that there was this girl, she needed a kidney transplant, and her brother was a perfect match. So her and her brother go in for surgery, and the brother wakes up, of course not feeling good because he had a kidney removed, but his sister wakes up, she doesn't have the incisions, she didn't get the kidney. Well, the reason why was because they had a temporary worker, she was a nurse, and this nurse, she accidentally, I don't know how you accidentally do this, but she thought the kidney that was removed from the brother was medical waste, and she threw it in the trash. And they're like, where's the kidney? And she's like, what kidney? And she's like, oh no, and she had thrown it in the trash. So here's the thing, when someone does something for a living, they do it full time, it's their specialty, they are less likely to make mistakes like that. So the brother now only has one kidney, and his sister never got his kidney, so then she had to be put on the transplant list again, wait even longer, do more dialysis because of this stupid nurse. Now, not all nurses are stupid, it's just the person that's stupid. But my point is this, that nurse was part-time. She did not do this as a specialty, it was not her full-time job, and she was not in the loop, and she should not have been working on a transplant floor. I think everybody that works in that field should be working full-time and know their stuff. So needless to say, there's a reason why that nurse made a mistake, it's because she's ignorant. She didn't know what she was doing, so she should not be working on something as serious as a transplant operation. That's my point. So that's why I'm not a fan of seasonal workers or temporary workers, because they're not your cream of the crop, because, literally they're not as educated as your full-time employees. They don't have the skill set. They just don't. Why? Because they don't have that training, and they don't have the training hours. It's almost like whenever you're getting a pilot's license. In order to get a pilot's license, you have to fly so many hours, and you have to land a plane, you have to take off and land, you have to do all this stuff. And also, you have to be able to get your plane out of an engine stall. Like, you have to practice that up in the air. But it's like, okay, if you don't have that practice, and if you don't have that many hours, then you can't become a pilot. It's the same thing with professional airline pilots. They have to have so many hours before they are the pilot, like the main captain of the plane, so to speak. So that's why you have all these rules, laws, and regulations, so that way people know what they're doing. So just FYI, be aware of that. Now, in terms of the things, or the undergraduate and graduate education that you can have in order to become a National Park Service law enforcement ranger, these are the different degrees that they are willing to take, although I do know that there is a park ranger degree. It is a 4-year degree, possibly 5-year degree, but I don't know if it is the law enforcement side of it. So I'm not really sure what all it includes. The park ranger degree, I do know, includes a firefighting route, because you have to be able to know, or you have to be able to put out a fire. Like, you have to have that education. Because think about national parks. Just think about what all they have to do. So we're talking about these undergraduate and graduate education degrees that you can have, but you still have to go through that training in order to become a National Park Service law enforcement ranger. So just FYI, be aware of that. So it says here you can have a degree in natural resource management, natural sciences, earth sciences, history, archaeology, anthropology, park and recreation management, law enforcement police science, and I'm going to get a drink of water, so hold on just a moment. I'm going to pause it. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. My apologies. The air is really dry right now here in Oklahoma, especially in Oklahoma City, because the temperature dropped and it got really cold, and I don't have a humidifier, so I need to invest in that. But anyway, the air is really dry. So anyway, in regards to the education that you can have to become one of these federal employees within this federal agency, law enforcement, police science, social sciences, museum sciences, business administration, public administration, behavioral sciences, sociology, or other closely related subjects pertinent to the management and protection of natural and cultural resources. Coursework in fields other than those specified may be accepted if it clearly provides applicants with the background of knowledge and skills necessary for successful job performance in the position to be filled. So that's one reason why I'm not a fan of temporary workers with this, because if you want the cream of the crop, then you want someone that does this as a full-time job. That's just how it is. I'm trying to remember if this was a dermatologist or what. This is a long time ago, but there was this doctor I was supposed to go see. I'm pretty sure it was a dermatologist. It's a female doctor, but she had just had a baby. And so, she was only working part-time, and I just had a feeling that her mind was not going to be on her work. Why? Because she had just had a baby. So I made the decision not to go see her, because I thought, well, I want someone that's not distracted. And I'm not against women having babies. That's a beautiful thing. But, it's very difficult for women to go back to work right away after having a baby, because guess what? They've had a baby, and, they're going to be thinking about their child. That's just how it is. So needless to say, there are times that if I know that someone, if a woman has just had a baby, more than likely I'm not going to make an appointment with them, because more than likely their mind is not going to be on their work. Because I've met women like this, and I've had experiences like that. I'll give an example. I was at a meeting at a church I went to many years ago. I'm no longer Catholic, but we were having sit-down meetings, and we're trying to discuss, okay, what do we want to see happen in our archdiocese, things of that nature. It was a total waste of time, because, the archdiocese didn't really care anyway about what the parishioners think about things, because it's all about the priesthood. But anyway, there's this woman at our table. We were divided out, I think 10 to 12 people at a table. And so it was like basically you have all these adults in this room, and it was obvious this woman had just had a baby, and she was breastfeeding because I'll just say it, her boobs were huge, and she was not wearing the right kind of bra, and all she could talk about was her baby. And it's like, okay, can we have adult conversations here? Like, can we talk about the subject at hand? Well, all she could talk about was her baby, and she got emotional, and she made everything about her baby, and her husband just kind of looked at her like, okay, she's making a scene. This is ridiculous. And it was embarrassing for him. And so, needless to say, I've never forgotten that. And not all women are like that. But it's like, when your mind is not in the game, just get out of the game. Like, I don't think she should have been there. I think she should have been at home with the baby. And I'm not saying that in a sexist way, not at all. It's just that she was not, she wasn't able to contribute to the group or to the conversation because she made everything about her. She made everything about her baby, and it's like, that's not the purpose of this meeting. That's not the purpose of the Archdiocese. I mean, everybody has value. All life has value, but we're not here to hear emotional sentences about your baby or the issues that you're going through or things like that. And it was just kind of bizarre. And what was funny was, I was younger than this woman and her husband. So it was me, this couple that just had a baby, and then everybody else at the table was way older than us. And all these way older people were just looking at her like, okay, here we go. Because they're looking at it from the point of view that they're retired. So they're in a different stage of life. And to me, it was kind of funny, but it was kind of irritating at the same time. Like, it was funny to see these old people, their reaction to this woman, and then to see the husband's reaction, and he was trying to calm her down. And then, and I'm trying not to laugh, but I'm also trying not to be irritated. Like, it was the strangest feeling for it to be funny, but yet irritating at the same time, because it's like, okay, we're trying to work on, okay, what are the problems of our Archdiocese? And of course, everything we said, the Archdiocese could care less to hear, but that's typical of a religion that is extremely male-dominated and doesn't care to listen to women. And, even if you're not emotional, they don't care to listen to you. And they don't even care to listen to the parishioners that are not female and are not giving birth. So it was just a very interesting meeting, but needless to say, there's a time and place for different things, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so it very much makes a difference in regards to that. But anyway, I'm sure that's probably going to ruffle some feathers. But, I'm not against women, not by any means. I'm a woman. I would love to have children someday. I'm not against children. I'm not against babies. But it was just kind of out of line, what this woman did. And so, needless to say, getting back to the original thing I was talking about, it's important to have full-time employees that know what they're talking about because their head is in the game. When someone's only part-time, their head is not in the game. And, I can give an example, or several examples of when I worked part-time jobs. And it's like I would show up to work. I would not have a clue what was going on. Why? Because I was part-time. And so a full-timer would have to inform me of all these things that are going on. And it was always very frustrating to customers whenever I'm like, well, I don't know the answer. Let me find out for you. And they could tell I was just there part-time because I didn't know what was going on. Well, imagine if that is taking place, which does take place, unfortunately, in our healthcare system. And then imagine if that is taking place, which obviously does happen, in our national parks. If there is a catastrophe in a national park or there is a medical emergency, do you really want someone that's only there part-time and hasn't done the training and is not up to date on their certifications? Is that the best that we can offer people? When people come and visit and see our national parks and then they accidentally get hurt. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's important to have the cream of the crop doing that kind of job because that's what you do when you do your job with excellence. See, I'm not a fan of part-time jobs. I'm just not. Like, even when I was a teeny bopper, when I worked, I really wanted to be full-time. I really wanted to work as many hours as possible because I wanted to learn. I also want to make more money. I want to grow the company, but because I was a teeny bopper and I was part-time, my labor was not considered as important as someone that was there full-time. So it's like, okay, well, if I could work more hours, I thought, okay, maybe my labor would be deemed as just as important. Well, it wasn't, because of my age, my sex, and I guess just my status in life, that I'm a teeny bopper. It was really weird. So needless to say, I don't work part-time jobs anymore. I haven't for some time, because I feel like as a part-time worker, you're purposely kept ignorant, and I don't like that, and that is a mistake. And also, pretty much you're kept from making more money, because you're just considered a part-timer. You know what it reminds me of? Working part-time reminds me of working as a temp, which I can't stand, working as a temporary employee. Whenever I get a job, or whenever I do a job, I do it well. And so what sucked was when I worked as a temporary staff accountant, and it was full-time work, and it was hard work, because, you're working as a staff accountant. It was just a tax season or whatever. You'd be surprised how many people look down on people that work as a temp, or they go through a temp agency, and they treat them like garbage because they're not considered as important, or they're not considered as human as a full-time permanent employee. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, just make me a permanent employee, but just make it for 3 or 6 months. Like, if that's the disrespect I'm going to get, then why don't we stop the disrespect and just make me a permanent employee, but only work this many months out of the year? Well, unfortunately, people's perceptions can sometimes be the problem. And here's the thing, working as a part-timer, especially as a staff accountant during a tax season, it gets it gets murky, because it's like you're only there part-time, but yet you're expected to know all these tax codes. It's like, well, why don't you just hire me as a full-time accountant? Because there is stuff to do all throughout the year. Like, staff accountants, they don't just help out or work during tax season. There are so many things that can be done, like bookkeeping, payroll, insurance, all this stuff. But here's the thing. If you're seen as a temporary employee, you're not treated right, typically. You're not treated the same. The respect is not there. And that always bugged me, because I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter, what my job title is, the respect should always be there. It should just always be there. That's just been my personal experience. But I will say this, in regards to our medical field, we should never have part-timers in the medical field. They should all be full-time. My personal opinion is that, we shouldn't have any part-time jobs. Everybody should be a full-time employee. Because just think about how much more knowledge you will have, and how much more money you will have the opportunity to make. See, because I look at it this way. I can't tell you how many times I've had part-time jobs, and it wasn't worth it for the fuel, the travel, and the stress. Because I looked at it this way, okay, why am I working a part-time job when if I get in a car wreck and my car gets totaled, the wages from my job don't even begin to pay for a new car to replace the one that, may or may not get in a car wreck. I was always concerned about that with having part-time work. And then whenever I worked part-time, I was like, please give me more hours. Please give me more hours. Well, being that I was in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is an at-will state, the odds of someone giving you more hours when they just view you as temporary, part-time, not as important as somebody else kind of work, the odds of them giving you more hours were pretty slim. And they didn't like you asking them for more work. It's like, give me something to do, give me something to do. I want to work, I want to work. They didn't like that. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So they would complain about their full-time workers not doing a good job, but then they wouldn't give their part-timers more work to do. I mean, does that make sense? No. But that is what happens in at-will states. So just be aware of that, because it gets old and it gets really, I was going to say it gets old and it gets tricky. And the reason why it gets tricky is because it's like you're trying to move up in status, you're trying to move up and have a better house, a better car, but it's like as long as you're working for somebody else, there's always someone there to try and push you down. Unless you work for a really good boss and a really good company. I think that's what frustrates a lot of people. Is that it's like, okay, I want to make more money, and I want to do a better job, but it's like, why am I being told no? That always bugged me. And I think it will always bug me because I'm a worker. Like, I love to work. I love to work. It's very important for me to, I would say it's very important for me to feel like I have accomplished something because I think that's important. I think it's important for people to have that sense of accomplishment regardless of what you do. And I think as a part-time employee, it's kind of hard to feel like you have accomplished anything because, technically you're not doing as much as a full-time worker. And, that's just the facts. That's just how life is with that. But I will go ahead and end this podcast because I'm going over a little over 30 minutes and I don't want this to be too long. But as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. God bless and bye-bye.